Alright, if you've been anything like me, you've been following the COVID news cycle way too closely. But that means that you've probably heard about these new mutant variants or strains of this virus. And you probably have a lot of questions, but they all really boil down to, what does this mean? Hello, I'm the Geeky Goth. So, to start, a little bit about me. I got my bachelor's degree in immunology and microbiology. Then I decided to stick around for a little bit more, and I'm currently a PhD student in the same field. Along the way, I've done coursework not only on our immune systems and how they work, and microbes and how they make us sick, and how they work together sometimes, but also in topics such as genetics, virology, cancer, and even on vaccines themselves. So today, I'll be drawing on this background as well as on the research of experts and other scientists in the field to talk about these mutations and mutants. Now we've got a lot to discuss, so let's get started. First of all, what is a mutant? Sadly, it's not X-Men, but it does have to do with a change or mutation to the genetic code. Let's look at this seemingly random string of letters. Each of these letters represents what we call a base. A base is a chemical molecule that is a part of the DNA. When a specific region of the DNA gets read by special machinery in our cells, this gets turned into a message that is used to instruct our cell of which building blocks to use to in turn make a functional protein. These bases then act similar to how the letters in our alphabet work so that we can put together words that have meaning in sentences. A change to the letter in a word could have different consequences. If we change the A in the word gray to an E, it's still the same word. However, other words, if we change just one letter, we completely change the word. The same is true in a genetic code. If we change just one letter in this sequence, it might do nothing, or it could change the instructions for which building block to use, where the change in the building block is then going to affect the final protein that's made. So this is roughly what it means when we say that a virus or anything else with a genetic code mutates. We're talking about a change to the genetic code from whatever original copy of that code we first found. But you might be asking, well, why does this happen in the first place? Well, for starters, it's just hard for anything to be perfect. In the case of this virus that causes COVID-19, its genome has about 30,000 bases. Imagine yourself trying to copy a Word document that has 30,000 characters perfectly, and you need to copy it as fast as you can, hundreds to thousands of times. Even with a backspace button, you're probably going to make a mistake or two. That's how these mutations occur. However, while popular culture usually has us thinking about mutations as being inherently bad, the reality is that these mutations are the opportunities that all organisms with genetic codes, which is all of them, have to evolve. Now, to understand what this means in real-world terms, we need to think about how these mutations change something like a protein. When we're thinking about what a mutation does to something like a virus, we have to think about how the change to this protein affects the function of not only the protein itself, but also the virus. If the mutation causes this protein to work less efficiently, that's going to make it harder for the virus to survive and reproduce, and it's going to make it easier for it to be detected and then thwarted by our immune systems. If this mutation instead causes the protein to function better, then that's going to offer the virus an advantage, whether it's that it can infect our cells faster or that it can escape our cells better so that it can try to infect new hosts. whatever it is, there's some advantage, and that's going to allow viruses with this mutation to survive better than those that don't. And this is how mutants or variants become dominant in a given population. In the case of these mutants to the virus that causes COVID-19, they haven't yet been associated with any worsening of the disease, and that's good. But some of them have been shown to make it easier for the virus to be transmitted or passed between people. And if we're thinking about slowing the spread, stopping infections, and ending the pandemic, then this is a bad thing for us. But what do these mutants and mutations mean for the vaccine that we made? The vaccine, after all, is using a viral protein. And yes, some of these mutations have been seen in this protein that we're using in the vaccines to train our immune systems to help recognize it and in turn the virus. To help us understand how these mutations may affect the vaccines, let's first look at how antibodies work. If this is a representation of our spike protein, the one that the vaccines are using, we can see that it has different parts. Up here might be where the viral protein is going to attach to our cells to help it get inside of them. Down here might be where it attaches to the rest of the virus so that it can actually pull the virus into our cells. And then there's all of this space in the middle. When our immune system sees this protein, it's not just going to pay attention to one part, it's going to make antibodies against all of the parts. So having an antibody that can recognize and attach to the protein up here is going to be useful, because with an antibody up here, it can't really attach to our cells. However, having an antibody anywhere on this protein is going to be useful. Another good thing is that we make antibodies to a lot of different parts of this spike protein. Let's pay attention to this top portion where it's attaching to our cells. Even given one specific part of the protein, like the end that's attaching to our cells, we don't just make one protein to this section. We make antibodies to a bunch of different parts of this protein. Now let's look at our mutant virus that has a mutation in its genetic sequence that causes this part of the protein to not look the same. This antibody can no longer attach to this specific part of the protein. However, all of the other antibodies can still attach to this protein the way that they did on the non-mutated strain. So this means that these vaccines aren't useless, and if the time comes and you're eligible, you should definitely still get one of these vaccines. Our immune system isn't dependent on just one antibody attaching to the spike protein. It uses a lot of them. But don't take my word for it. A lot of really smart people have been studying this and will continue to do so to make sure that we don't get caught by surprise by any of these mutations. Now, just because we said and saw a little bit how this one mutation isn't going to render these vaccines useless, we can't get laxy-daisy about preventing the spread of this virus. Remember, we said that this mutation has been shown to make the virus spread more easily. And we also said that those mutants that make the virus survive better are more likely to stick around. And guess what? They're gonna continue to mutate. It will be random, but let's say that in this mutant that this antibody can't bind to, we have another mutation. And now we lose this antibody. If we allow this virus to continue to spread more or less uncontrollably and continue to mutate, then you can see that eventually these mutations will become a problem for our immune responses and maybe the vaccines. Now, thankfully, we aren't at that point yet. And the good thing is that there are things all of us can do right now to make sure that we never get to that point. The number one strategy: don't give this virus another body to survive and possibly mutate in. None of these mutations are going to allow this virus to get around a physical barrier like a mask. Meanwhile, not gathering in large groups and avoiding close contact with people is going to limit how much air and the droplets that may be full of viruses in the air that we're sharing and possibly infecting or being infected by other people. And I get it. These measures, they aren't fun, but they will work to keep us from spreading the virus and continuing the pandemic, which is keeping us from having real fun. It was already important for so many reasons to stop the spread of this virus, to stop the infections, but with the emergence of these variants, it's even more dire to do this. Because yeah, this pandemic will end, but the actions and decisions we all make are going to decide when it ends and also how it's going to end. What is that end going to look like? Let's be real. It's already gotten pretty bad. We don't need to make it worse. So let's stop the spread. The faster and more efficiently we do this, the sooner we don't have to do these things anymore, and we can get back to better things to do. Until next time, mask up and keep your distance.